My name is Jayant Bhandari, and I have been hosting this seminar for the last 14 years. When I started the seminar, one of the factors behind it was to address the great replacement that was happening in Canada. Now we don't have to worry about it. Now we don't have to worry about it because the great replacement has already happened. Mostly when people want to advocate anything, they select data. I'm not going to provide you any selected data. They are all from the home page of Census Canada. So you can go back and refer to that data. Your anecdotal experience is not the statistical reality. What happens, what you see in this room is not what is happening in Canada. I want to provide some statistical facts to do with Canada and how Canada has committed harakiri. Canadian population grew by 1 million in 2022. I was told 2 days back that there was actually a miscalculation. It actually grew by higher than 1 million, but I'm going to stick with that. That is equivalent to an increase of 2.7% per year. If this rate continues, and Justin Trudeau wants to ramp up immigration, Canadian population will increase by 100% in 26 years. When I moved to Canada in 2003, its population was 32 million people. Today, it is 40 million people, an increase of 25%. Now, had immigration not occurred, the Canadian population would have fallen, given that its fertility rate is only 1.47%. But let's not get into the nitty-gritty about the fertility of native Canadian women. Let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. For those of you who don't have a sense for numbers, the statistical numbers that I just quoted, let me give you in terms of feeling what it means. 1 out of every 4 people in Canada arrived in Canada after my arrival in Canada 20 years back. As it stands today, 26% of Canadians are first-generation immigrants. This is from Census 2021 data. It's on the homepage of Canadian Census. 26% are first-generation Canadians. 18% are second-generation Canadians. 32% of Canadians under 15 in 2021 were second-generation immigrants, which means that in a school, 1 out of 3 students are second-generation immigrants. Add to that the first-generation immigrant students. Now, my interest is not to get into the statistical nuances, but to show that nearly 50% of Canadians are first or second-generation immigrants. I asked several of you during today if they knew what the number of first and second-generation immigrants was. And no one had the correct answer. They were not even close to the correct answer. Now, Justin Trudeau intends to ramp up immigration. Most of these new immigrants will come from the third world. Before the 1970s, most immigrants came from Europe. That was the legal requirement. Most of the immigrants to Canada until 1970s came from Europe. Today, only 10% of total immigrants come from Europe. Does this matter whether they come from? Ladies and gentlemen, it does. Canada has irrevocably changed, and that's why I said it has already committed harakiri in just 2 decades since I immigrated to Canada. It is said that a frog in a pot that is slowly getting boiled fails to realize that it is getting cooked. But political correctness has meant that Canadians have failed to understand what is happening to Canada when the proverbial pot has been heating rapidly. Last year's immigrants represented 200 countries, representing 450 languages, 450 mother tongues. Now, I always wanted to not talk much about India, but Canada leaves me no choice. India is by far the most significant source of immigration, accounting for 27% of total immigrants. Again, this is Census Canada data, not mine. A distant second is China with only 7%. Now you also know who are the most desperate people to leave their homeland. Can you guess which is the third biggest supplier of immigrants to Canada? Afghanistan with 5.4%. Fourth one, Nigeria with 5%. Now, Brazil and South Korea were among the top 10 until recently. Justin Trudeau has kicked them out. Brazil and South Korea have been replaced by who? Nigeria and Syria. Ladies and gentlemen, where you come from matters. 38%, now this is another myth, that most of the immigrants to Canada are skilled immigrants. That isn't true. Again, Census Canada data. 38% of immigrants to Canada are family sponsorships and, guess what, refugees. That's where Eritrea, Nigeria, Somalia, etc. come. Now, if these nationalities didn't shock you, perhaps political correctness has killed your cultural awareness. Indeed, when you stop speaking the truth, and unfortunately political correctness means that a lot of people have stopped speaking the truth, you eventually change your thinking because you don't talk about it, you really get convoluted thinking of the facts. Or maybe when I say this thing, and I've known Canadians not express changing their face when I mention these things to them, many of you probably acted as if I said nothing material. For you don't want to be cancelled, and you don't want to commit a thought crime. Western political correctness has metastasized into a plural understanding of cultures. Even those who can see what I'm implying prefer to make money, and that's a lot of my friends, and maintain their lifestyles, their country houses, the sizes of their kitchen cabinets, and the schools that their kids go to, instead of speaking up. Canadians have put Canada on a path to inevitable destruction. There's no history in human affairs when a society willingly gave itself away to foreigners. There's no history of a society maintaining any values once foreigners overtook it. As I said, 50% of people inside Canada today are first or second generation immigrants. And indeed, there's no history in human affairs where multiculturalism and ethnic diversity have not led to major civil conflicts. They are coming your way sooner than later. Now, most people haven't experienced such an increase in immigrants. talk with people here, they are amused with the numbers because your anecdotal experience is not the statistical reality. The composition of this room's audience refuses to change. This room's composition does not represent the ethnic proportion of Canadian population. It continues to be men of European ethnicity. Most of you, figuratively or literally, live in your gated communities, away from ghettos. Put differently, the new immigrants often get ghettoized in areas you never ever visit. You only encounter them when you take a taxi or something like that. But remember, they have the same vote that you have. They have no interest in seminars like this, and the audience of this seminar shows to you what is happening. They have no interest in European values, European Western philosophy. They are economic migrants without an interest in providing nutrition to this society. They have, at best, no interest or concept of Western philosophy. Let's try this next time you go out. Take a day to visit and soak in Surrey, Brampton, which is close to Toronto, or Richmond, and get a sense of proportion and perspective. Because as I said, if you live in your gated community, you won't know what is happening in Canada. Now, I mention Canada not because, I mentioned so much about India, not necessarily because I have a special dislike for Indians, because I did mention actually Nigerians and Eritreans and Somalians, but just because I know the Indian ghettos better. I have been there. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, and there are a couple of people from Calgary here. There was a pitched battle in Calgary among, guess who? Eritreans. I did not even know, and Toronto too. Now, where did all these Eritreans come from? Thank you, Justin Trudeau, for refugees. You bring in refugees from the third world, you bring in the cultures of the third world. Now, if you visit one of these ghettos and soak in for a while what's happening there, you will realize that Canada is like a train constantly changing its passengers. For a majority of you, and I repeat, a majority, the passengers aren't who you started with. As I said, close to 50% of Canadians are already first and second generation Canadians, and more than 90% of them are of non-European origin. And where you come from matters. Now, I provided you some information, some facts, but you have to go there to soak in emotions about what that means for you, what it means for the near future. I'm no longer talking about the long-term or medium-term future of Canada, but the near future of Canada. You will, when you go there and soak in, you will emotionally realize that Canada is irredeemably on its way to an ethnically non-European majority in a very few short years. Should this matter? Of course it does. None of the 200 countries on this planet, which is a civilization, has a non-European or non-East Asian majority. This is the empirical fact. Now I must, because I said something politically very incorrect, let me devote the rest of my talk on explaining what I said. Now you thought I left India because of its utterly venal and tyrannical government. Not really. For that government is utterly stupid, and bribes take care of absolutely everything. You can rape and kill and it's no problems as long as you pay the bribes. But the character of the government is a symptom of the underlying society. I ran away from Indian society, which has no concept of honor, no integrity, no moral values, no rationality, and no interest in anything except the material. And what is the material? Money and sex. More precisely, I ran away from Indians. With time, the institutions the British left behind have been hollowed out in India. And the civilizational constraints that they had imposed, the British colonizers had imposed, have fallen apart. With time, India is bound to increasingly become barbaric and savage. That is not so much because of the Indian government, but because of Indians. Remember, 27% of Canadian immigrants are Indians. Now, most other immigrants who come to Canada come from other third world hellholes and have similar cultural background to that of India. So when I talk about India, I'm basically talking about 90% of immigrants to Canada. And these people are rooted in materialism and absence of civilizational constraints and moral values. There is not an abysmal lack of moral values in the third world. There's a complete absence of moral values in the third world. Now, every single Indian city I've ever been to has at least a couple of high-rise buildings devoted to one thing, to accommodate tens and tens of agents who help people immigrate to, guess what? Canada. What do? Most of them offer fake documents, fake educational qualifications, and get you admissions into colleges structured not for education, but for assisting people to stay in Canada, to stay here long enough to get citizenship. Isn't it crazy that Canadians have given Canada away to those who faked their documents? Absolutely mind-boggling. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, you have no choice but to learn about India. You have no choice but to learn about Nigeria and Eritrea and Somalia and Afghanistan and Syria. And you will learn it well over the next few years. In fact, you should be visiting these countries. You should be visiting India. You should be sending your daughters and sons to know about India and experience it. Because you should now learn what you have brought in. Just ensure that when you send your daughters, they have some male company. Now, you should also go there because you should learn what the Europeans of the past understood. The wisdom that political correctness has erased from your psyche. A few years back, I went to an Indian event in South Vancouver. As it happens in India, nothing worked. There was no coordination. There was no timing. What happened on the stage had nothing to do with the schedule they had set. They played wrong music. The organizers fought with each other on the stage. And they argued with each other. And then they all came together to talk about how they should all vote for members of our community in the Canadian federal government. This is what you have brought to Canada. Now, sometimes, and I'm sure you have seen it, but your eyes saw it, but your mind ignored. Sometimes Canadian airports and train stations look indistinguishable from Indian ones, except that you can still buy a train ticket without paying a bribe. The ticket seller still treats you with respect, although that respect is falling away with every passing day. The trains still operate reasonably well, albeit continue to worsen. And you still don't see cockroaches and rats inside the train compartments in Canada. But you will get there within the next few years. Eventually, planes will fall off the sky. Trains will collide, killing hundreds of people. Massive forest fires will happen, not because of climate change, but because of lack of work ethics, incompetence, and apathy. Bridges will fall apart, as they habitually do in the third world. Infrastructure will deteriorate, and quality of hygiene will worsen. Nepotism and bribery will become commonplace. And I'm talking about this because the great replacement has already happened in Canada. You will have to start worrying about female infanticide, for example, and female genital mutilation. Caste problems will require you to create legal remedies. Well, sorry, some of those issues are already here, next door to you. Although no inquiry will blame the cause of accidents to diversity, inclusivity, and equity. Hindu and Sikh problems will continue to worsen in Canada. But none of the Canadians, sorry, some of people here will have the courage, but not many Canadians I know will have the courage to tell these Hindus and Sikhs that they should take their fight back home to India. And they should have said to the Eritreans last week when they fought among each other in Calgary, go back home. These idiots, the idiots from India, celebrate Independence Day of India in Vancouver. Now, how stupid can one be? They got rid of Europeans from India, and then they took all the pains and fake documents and all the refugee and all the border crossings to come and live where? A country run by Europeans. How idiotic can you be? But really, the underlying fact is that the concept of reason is conspicuous by its absence among those people. And that is what you have brought in. And then they vote on tribal basis and elect people of their kind, their tribe, and their religion, setting in motion the conversion of Canadian institutions to that of what they left behind, which is the hollowed out, third world, tribal, savage, barbaric institutions. Of course, the inertia of the past will continue to let those institutions in Canada survive for a few more years, but as I said, the great replacement has already happened. It is a gross mistake to think that people leave their home countries to escape their tyrants. As in North Korea, the real tyrants do not let their people escape. Virtually everyone else running away and coming to the first world is running away from the hellhole they created for themselves. They are part and parcel of the hellholes they left behind. They remake their host country in the image of what they left behind. When you bring them in, you bring the subtle subliminal ways, they will participate in making Canada a hellhole. Let me delve a bit deeper, as if I haven't delved in deeper enough, but let me delve in a bit deeper. Changing culture is not a generation or 2 generations long process. It's not even a centuries long process. It's at best a millennia, and I'm not exaggerating, a millennia long process. Something that colonizers and Christian missionaries who spent time in Africa and Indian subcontinent or what is now Latin America would have told you. It's a millennia long process at best. And that is assuming that culture is not hardwired. Civilization, the concept of civilization is a uniquely Western concept. The only people who have been able to partially copy that concept of civilization is East Asian countries. The third world, where 90% or so of Canadian immigrants come from, have no interest in Western values. For them, concepts like honor, honesty, and fairness are alien. They are driven by expediency and acquisition of resources. Desperate, and they are truly desperate in their third world hellholes, it is not the absence of liberty or the absence of rule of law that drives them to the first world. It is not the absence of liberty or the absence of rule of law that worries them. They are not worried about it. In fact, they mostly worry about it, about controlling other people and about exploiting other people. They are blind to the concept of liberty and they are blind to the concept of the rule of law. And this does not change even after centuries and at least a millennia. Now, what happens when they arrive? When they arrive to the West, they do not see the existence of values of the West. They don't see the concept of integrity, honesty, the rule of law, or liberty. There's only one thing that the lenses they wear help them see, and that is money-making opportunities is the only thing that they seek in the West. This is the only thing that they perceive as of value in the West. Given their state of mind, they think that Canada would be a much better place if their religions, their rituals, and their cultures were to be imposed on Canada. Again, think from what the state of mind that they have. Because they are only interested in money and they have no interest in other Western values, they do think that the homeland that they left behind, those values were much better than the Canadian values. Let's talk about one case to expand on this. A senior Indian government official I once met who was on an extended visit to the West, actually in the UK. And I have many stories like this. I was talking with him and he told me he hated the West. He found that the lack of noise and lack of smell made him lonely. He complained that his work was done without a need for connections, and no one came to prostrate before him. Now, if you go to an Indian office, anywhere in the country, any government office, you have to beg and prostrate. There's no other way out. You, of course, have to give a bribe, but you have to prostrate and beg as well. He complained to me that there was no one lining up to meet him and greet him. He felt deeply hurt and unrecognized. My Bangladeshi friend is laughing at it. It's the same story in all the third world hellholes. That's it.
No one came to greet him, no one came to prostrate himself.
That's it. This senior Indian bureaucrat I met, he didn't know how to pass his time. He desperately wanted his bank to take longer to do its job, and he wanted his electricity to stop working so that he could spend his time chasing the electricity office to get his electricity working. Again, you have to and you must understand the mindset of the people who have arrived in Canada. Because, now remember, they came here only for money, not for other things, because they like the third world hellhole cultures. They actually come to despise you because they came for money and they uprooted themselves from their culture and their ecology. As I said, they have no interest in Western values or liberty. They are not running away from tyranny. They like tyranny. They like the nanny government. They have a visceral hatred for peace and order. And again, this is very important. You have to understand what is happening in their mind. They don't like peace and order, as exemplified with the Indian bureaucrat I said. He wanted noise and smell. And if you go lower class in third world, they want fights, they want arguments, and they want to kill each other because that is what occupies their time. They have no other interests in their mind. They have visceral hatred for peace and order, and I might add that they find Western values abhorrent. The more skilled among them, even when they earn million-dollar salaries, and now I'm talking about the so-called legal immigrants, vote for the left. They love the nanny government. They vote now clearly, and now they are clearly in majority. Their voting pattern clearly reflects in the Canadian politics. And you don't see it because you think these people need changing. The problem is you have lost the majority vote in Canada. Symbiotic with their absence of values is their failure to have any gratitude. They don't have the concept of gratitude. The concept of honor, integrity, morality, the rule of law, and gratitude are symbiotic with each other. Put yourself in the shoes of such an immigrant. They come to the West for nothing else than money. They did not run away from tyranny. That is a fake explanation. Ask an immigrant, what does he miss in Canada? And almost invariably, you will get a response. He misses his friends, food, family, connection, the ecology of what he left behind. He makes it clear that he comes for money. They come here for nothing else than money. And this is irrespective of how much money they make in Canada or in other Western countries. They have left the poop smell. And remember, 50% of Indians poop in the open. They left the chaos behind, the noise and the razzmatazz behind in the third world hellhole they left. Now, these things might not be endearing to you, and you might think because of your upbringing that why would anyone want noise, poop smell around himself? But they are the necessary ecology that the immigrant craves. They flourish in them. They left their community, friends, and family to whom they were attached with petty quarrels. And they like those petty quarrels. They are attached to those petty quarrels. They are attached to the backstabbings. They are attached to the bitchings and defrauding each other's as part of their existence. Remind yourself of last week's riot in Calgary and Toronto. They are uprooted in Canada because they have nothing to hold them in Canada. The only thing that interests them in Canada is, guess what? Money. They will, because that's the money is the only thing they see, they will work towards converting Canada into what's they left behind, but with a visceral hatred for Canada. But how do you convert a country, Canada, to what you left behind when there are immigrants from 200 countries speaking 450 mother tongues, with each preferring a different kind of chaos, a different kind of proverbial and real poop smell? And each aiming for converting Canada into what they left behind, but with a visceral hatred for immigrants from other countries and, of course, from their own, what they left behind themselves. If you visit Brampton, Toronto, you might realize that the immigrants, even after decades of living in Canada, must create poop smell, noise, and chaos to seek comfort from existential crisis that Canada otherwise imposes on them. Remember, if you don't have noise and poop smell, it creates too much silence in your life. And I'm not making this up. It creates an existential crisis in them. It creates a void in their lives. This happens even in areas where houses run for millions of dollars. And that is why I call them ghettos, even though they might be very rich people. Now, given this predicament, assimilation is impossible unless you can trigger somehow in people a passion for Western values, for liberty, for the rule of law. I tell you, I have never met a person who can actually trigger that among people who actually never had it in their cultures. Now, situation is getting far worse in Canada. You not only don't assimilate, because of the insecurities and because of the massive number of people coming into Canada or have already come into Canada, they prefer to live among people of their own kind. Eritreans, Ethiopians, Pakistani Muslims, Syrians, Persians, Indians, Afghanistan, they all set up their own ghettos. And they are now in a critical mass because you have brought in so many people that can all have their own individual ghettos. And they stick to their original culture and make it worse because they are insecure within that small ghetto. Based on faulty, unexamined beliefs, Canada has diluted its population by 100% in just 2 generations. And this is getting worse by the day. Now, there is another very erroneous Canadian belief that I often hear about, and I'm sure someone will mention this. They think that assimilation eventually happens. And as I said earlier, it's a millennia-long process. Now, assimilation in a certain way does happen. They are very happy adopting the low-class hip-hop, no values in the second generation. They also learn to speak English better. And they also learn how to wear Western clothes. But deeper down, contrary to conventional wisdom, the situation worsens. Now, it's not that the first generation was necessarily grateful for the opportunities they got in Canada and the other Western countries. The second generation, because they grow up here, they get split in their thinking. They have romanticism, they develop romanticism for the homeland that their parents left behind, because they will not have experienced even what their parents would have experienced. Contrary to conventional wisdom, crime rate increases in the second generation. And this is, of course, people mention this as if it's a fact that crime rate and assimilation happens with each passing generation. It's actually the other way. If you talk with people from Surrey, they will tell you that, which is dominated by Indians, that you must be a part of a gang. You have to be a part of a gang in schools in Surrey. If you don't want to get beaten up. in short, with every passing generation, Indians in Canada become more Indians than the Indians in India are. Let me summarize my talk. You bring in people of the third world, and you get the third world, and you convert your society into the third world. You already have done that. It's only the inertia that is keeping Canada moving, staying as a first world nation right now. And quite honestly, it is too late for Canada. Canada will become a third world majority country, even if Canada stopped immigration today. And Canada is ramping up immigration. The people of the future will be amused by how, using simplistic, unexamined, faulty myths of multiculturalism and diversity, Canada, what was once a great country, destroyed itself. They will be amused that, afraid of being cancelled and to preserve their lifestyles from leftists and stupid wokes, Canadians let their country be ransacked within 2 generations. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I'll happily respond to any questions if there is any.
Jayant, it is such a negative message. You don't leave us any room for any optimism.
Yes. Yes, there's zero optimism because, no, absolutely. I grew up in a third world hellhole, and I have traveled to a lot of third world hellholes. I have been to 100 countries, and the one passion that has driven me to traveling the world is to understand cultures. Again, empirically, you know that out of 200 countries on the planet, there's not one country with non-European or non-East Asian majority which is a civilization. This is a fact of life.
So what is our best course of action?
As I said, it's, my guess is that because you Canadians have, and I've been, I started this seminar, I have always wanted to talk about Western civilization, its philosophy, and I wanted to, one message was to end this immigration. It's too late now. I don't think there's an easy way out for Canada. There will be massive ethnic conflicts in Canada eventually. You are ignoring it right now because what you see is a Hindu-Sikh conflicts within Eritrean groups, but eventually that will spill over and that will come to the streets right here. I would give it a few years, not even a decade actually. There's no easy way out. Canada will have massive problems. The problem is, once you have given away your passports, you can't undo it. They are citizens. It's too late. So the only way to clean that up will lead to a huge amount of violence and culling, and it's not going to be a pretty sight.
Is it on? Okay. I think you forget how contagious Western culture is. You don't get too many people in Western cultures who play Indian music or so on. Some, but Michael Jackson is much more contagious than someone from the third world. You look at second generation people from third world, I don't see that their parents complain, they don't speak our language, they don't listen to us, they want to go out to watch movies. I haven't seen studies in Canada here, but the big study done by the Cato Institute, Powell and, I can't remember his name now, their claim is that the second generation cultural values are very similar to other Americans. I'm sure the same thing is true here.
Absolutely, that's true. And as I said, this is the low-class hip-hop values of the West, which are very easily copied by people from the third world. They learn, the women from the third world learn to dress they copy everything low class of Hollywood and low class of the West, which has nothing to do with Western values. They copy those very quickly, and they copy, as you rightly said, dishonoring their parents. The third world is full of people who have no respect for their parents, and they copy it very quickly here.
Jayant, I will not comply with a lot of what we see and hear in our political system, and I will not agree that everything is lost. I looked back, and Tamara Leach is standing trial today for creating mischief. But has everyone forgotten who participated in the truckers? It wasn't just whites and Europeans. It wasn't just anyone. I think there is an ascendance of our human spirit that can transcend the cultural enigma that you're portraying. I know you've seen a lot. I know we've seen the hellholes, and the numbers of them are atrocious, and we've seen throughout history. But I will not give up.
No, thank you.
My,
are maybe the solution to what you're saying, because you might be speaking about tendencies, but as with any group, they're not that homogeneous group that you can keep that all of them to the same shape. There are people, maybe a minority, that are coming here to improve their condition, and they think for themselves and are actually admiring Western knowledge. So in fact, I think people like that, maybe not right now, like for example, the Sousa, they have more tools to speak against the mainstream woke culture that actually people from the traditional Anglo-Saxon culture, because they don't get hassled as easily. So in a sense, you might be right, there are these tendencies, but I would say people like yourself, or people who see that perspective, even though minority, they might actually help us revive even though Western knowledge.
Well, this is a statistical mistake people make all the time. I generalized. I did not talk about every single immigrant. I talked about an average immigrant. What you talked about is the tail end of awakened immigrants, which is a minute fraction of total migrants. Their vote is still a fraction of a very small fraction of the total people. So again, what matters is the average when you are bringing in groups. I again did not talk about specifically about people. I have great Indian friends. I have Indian friends here in this room. I have friends from other countries. That's not what I'm talking about. Talking about the average people that have come here, which is leading to the riots in Calgary, the Hindu-Sikh problem in Canada, and that's actually happening in large parts of Canada now. The plane that got blown up 20, 30 years back in Canada. So we are talking about an average. I'm not talking about specific people. They are great people from Eritrea, Somalia, or India in this country. I'm talking about the average.
I am from the United States, and I totally agree with Jayant. That is exactly my experience. And the nature of my work is I happen to look at a tremendous amount of data. And I call this phenomena the women's basketball phenomena. If all your friends are women who play basketball, obviously women are taller than men. So a lot of people who have a reasonable amount of finances and are educated, they're not seeing what I would call a typical person from another country. So a concept of what somebody is what you said on the very tail end. And I highly recommend what you said. Move to one of these places for a year. Teach school in one of these places for a year. Then you might have a different point of view because they don't have a realistic view of what's happening.
That's why I said these people who, and I know this is not palatable what I said, but you you to really truly understand there's go-to ghettos. And I'm not saying, as Rothbard said, if you don't have an opinion, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to have an opinion, understand the statistical bell curve, not just the extreme best part of the bell curve, but understand the bell curve and then have an opinion. That's all I can say. Thank you.
I know Doug has a question, but one of my comments was to finish on a high note. But I want to identify a September 20th coast to coast event that is supposed to happen in Canada with 1 million people marching against peaceful protests for gender ideology and the sexualization of our children. And the children are going to be what will unite all Canadians and all people. This human trafficking factor that is happening in this movement this movie that came out this year, I think The Sound of Freedom, I think that there is a big, I think there's a huge hopefulness for a lot of things to actually be grasped with what this is about.
I think hope is a superstitious belief. Facts are facts, and hope is superstitious if not backed by facts. 1 million out of... Canada brought in 1 million new people last year. So this million does not really count. What you visually see, and this is what I often hear from conservatives and libertarians, that libertarian size is growing. Capitalism Morality has grown by 100% in the last 1 year. Does it mean that conservative ideas and libertarian ideas are growing by 100%? No, they are not growing by 100%. It's just that these people are coming, they are more visible to each other. But the rest is still the same. The balance of left and right and wokes is still the same. And the size of the wokes and lefts and people who have no understanding of Western values is actually increasing because of the rapid inflow of immigrants. There's no history, there's nothing in human history where you brought in, diluted your population by 100% in 2 generations, and that society still survived. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to endorse everything that Jayant has said. I came to Canada about 30 years ago, and I was in a weak position. I had to go house to house tutoring. And when you go tutoring, house to house, you're at the mercy of the people you're tutoring. And they turned out to be mainly people from the third world. Arabs, Somalis, East Indians. They cheated me, they humiliated me, they took advantage of their powerful position. I don't want to go into the details because there's not much time. But I suffered from third world cheating, exploitation, bullying, because I was in a weak position. And you know what? You only get to know the character of a people when they have power over you. You get to know the character of a person when he has power over you, when you have to live in his house for a few days. Then you'll see his true character. And white Canadians will soon see the character of the people, and because soon those people will have power over them. Now, this gentleman here is very idealistic. He talks idealistically, and you know what? Idealistic people end up under the bus very quickly when faced with the real problem. Yes, the truckers' convoy had a few brown faces among them, a few. This was a white resistance, as you saw in all those towns through which the convoy passed, and all those white Canadians came out, men and women, waving. It was in that instinctive spirit of freedom and individual rights that Europeans have, that they've always pioneered, which is what your rulers fear, that white spirit, the same spirit which leads to something like the first parliament, the jury system, where not an official, but 12 common people come and make the decision. And that truckers' convoy struck fear into the hearts of the colonizers. And these are colonizers. The average Indian the average Bangladeshi, the average African, he votes for the candidates who will have more immigration so that they can take this land. I know them, hundreds of them. They say, at election time, they say, vote for that candidate because he's pro-immigration and he's good for us to bring our mamacitas, our nephews, our slum people to come and take over this wide land. That is what they vote for. Gratitude is not in them. They are like cockroaches. Once they come as beggars, but they end up as cockroach invaders. And if you want to see that, you, sir, who talked about the truckers' convoy, look at Jagmeet Singh and how he reacted to the truckers' convoy. Jagmeet Singh's first instinct was, if these stupid whites awaken on this COVID issue, they might awaken to the fact that their country is being taken over. And he spoke tirelessly about the truckers as dangerous people, terrorists, and he talked about foreign interference. There's foreign money coming in, because as soon as you awake that foreign threat, you can have repression and control and arrests. And Jagmeet Singh is the perfect example of the ungrateful third world colonizer who will one day put his foot upon your neck. Thank you, sir.
As I said earlier, Frank Raymond is one of the finest people you can come across. He's from a third world hellhole. But that does not change the average character of people who come from Bangladesh.
Hello, quick question. What is it about your makeup that distinguishes you from other immigrants and makes you more pro-Canadian? I myself am a naturalized citizen.
I mean, I don't even know how else to live. As a child, as a 6 or 7 year old kid, I was shocked by the non-stop stupidities that I saw in India growing up there. So I don't even know why other people are not the way I am. They don't fight for anything. When a policeman stops you in India or in any other third world countries, they bend over, they take their pants down right away. It's the nature of those people, and I don't understand why they do it.
You're a trans-Canadian.
Sorry?
You're a trans-Canadian. You're born in the wrong body.
That's, yeah, I mean, I would say people like Frank Raymond and I are mutants.
I always hope is a bad birth control method. But if you want to see what I think is an example, just look at what's happening in South Africa.
That's a perfect example of what is coming to Canada.
And most people are totally unaware
Yeah.
of what's happening in South Africa.
Because again, you can't report it because it's a genocide of white people now currently happening in.
Horrific.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Jayant. I think I see the world quite different from you. Okay, let's assume we live in gated communities. And now the government is bringing in massive migrants from the third world. But my take is the elites living in the gated communities are still in complete control. They feed the migrants as well as even white general population with unreal food, processed food, and eventually will bring down their intelligence. And yeah, the new migrants will be also intoxicated by those processed food and keep their IQ intelligence low enough to be controlled.
Yeah.
So my question is, if we are living in those gated communities, how possible these people will be able to topple the paradise of those who live in the...
Well, I mean, it's in a democracy, it's the majority that matters. So the increasingly Europeans are still in control of Canada, but you have very low-class, low-IQ Europeans now controlling Canada and the US, unfortunately. And they have been largely voted into power by third world people. So look at the defense minister, the earlier, I don't really remember the name. Was it Harbans Singh or the ex-defense minister of Canada, and he's still a cabinet minister. What was his achievement? He was a cop, and he got elected from a ghetto. I can be slightly wrong here, an Indian ghetto in Vancouver, and the next day he was the defense minister of Canada. Now, so you will have ghetto people, ghetto psychopaths eventually emerging into positions of power. It's a slow process. It won't change overnight. It will take a few years because you still have the inertia of the Titanic. The Titanic will still keep moving, but it will start to fall apart eventually. I think I should take the last question and we should end this.
Just quickly, follow up there to your interesting dissertation on voting patterns of immigrants and your offering of Jagmeet Singh as an example of an ungrateful immigrant. There must be some discussion in the foreign language newspapers about the truckers' convoy or other indicators you could probably offer. What do they say? I mean, in these foreign language newspapers published in Canada about that event, if anything?
Yeah, maybe you can respond to that, Frank. Very shortly, Frank.
I read the ethnic newspapers sometimes. In fact, what got me into this activism for white Canadians and, well, white people generally, what got me into this activism was something I read in an Indian minority newspaper in Vancouver called The Link, in which they were complaining that the Canadian government was actually making them jump through hoops to bring their relations in. They wanted to sponsor. Once one guy is in, he wants chain migration. He wants to sponsor his nephew, his son, his granddad, his limping grandma who couldn't possibly contribute one dime to Canada but would take all the medical care, free medical care from Canada. And they were complaining that the Canadian government has the nerve to tell us, to make us jump through hoops, and they tell us that we should learn Canadian culture. And what culture can they show us, says the Link newspaper, but a freckle-faced girl from the prairies? We have 1,000-year culture in India, and I heard the same thing from Chinese people, by the way. We have 1,000-year culture, and what do you have but 150 years? Now, that's what actually got me into it, the foreign language newspapers in which they openly, among themselves, insult white Canadians and basically want to take every inch of the land, of the fertile land for themselves. Now, about the truckers' convoy, it was much the same thing. What I could read in the Indian newspapers in Canada was, this is an alarming development. You know, we need repression immediately. We need to clamp down, we need arrests, we need people to be silenced, otherwise these buggers might wake up. They're beginning to be very rambunctious, and this is a very alarming trend. What we need is a bit of repression. But the newspaper said exactly what Jagmeet Singh said. Let's arrest them, let's investigate them, let's freeze their bank accounts. They're on the way to being terrorists.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.